Hi there, and welcome to Basically Longarm Quilting, featuring the INNOVA AutoPilot Mach 3. In today's episode, we are going to be taking a look at how to complete a border around your quilt. And there's a couple of different steps that go into it, so I want to make sure I start you off with those steps to help you be more successful. The first thing that you're going to want to do whenever you're starting with your border is you're going to do that top border corner section of quilting, and we're going to set that up. You're going to quilt that out. You're going to roll through your quilt. If you're doing an edge to edge through the center, or if you're doing custom work through the center, you're going to do all of that. We're going to leave the sides empty as we go. When we get to the bottom, we're going to do the bottom border corner section that we have, and then after that's completed, we're actually going to take the quilt off and physically turn it and put it back on. And yes, we're actually going to turn that and put it back on the frame. It's going to be less start and stops when you're doing the sides. It's going to match up a whole lot easier, and it's going to be less math. So let me show you exactly how we can do that in AutoPilot. So on our quilt here, we have our top section of our border working around in this ash gray color. And just as a reminder, there's always 1,000 different ways you can do something in this software, especially with borders. This is just the way that I found it to be most easy for me. However, find out what works best for you and do that. This is just giving you a couple of different ways to look at it, maybe blending some of these techniques with what you currently do to make it a little bit faster for you. So let's go over to our software real quick. And the first thing that I want to do is find some border and corner patterns that I want to work with. So I'm going to come into my pattern library, and I'm going to be looking for another set of patterns by Joyce Lundergan. So I'm going to look for Key Dot. It's ones that I've got, and these are my corner pattern and then the border that's going to go with it. So I'm going to double left click on these patterns to bring them into my pattern pad. I'm going to close the pattern pad, or close the pattern library, excuse me, and in my pattern pad over here, I've got those patterns. So I need to tell AutoPilot where my border is on this quilt, and I'm going to do that with push pins. So I'm going to go back over to my quilt, and remember, your left handle button is your push pin button, and you can start wherever you'd like. I'm going to start down here at my bottom left section. And I'm going to have my laser light directly on my basting when I'm out here on the outside, and then on the inner, my laser light's going to be directly on the seam line. So I'm going to come down here, and I'm just going to start putting push pins down with my left handle button, following around this section as we work around all the way. Coming down the right hand side, and this is going to be one continuous piece. It helps it just keep it one little section whenever you're ready to delete it. We're just going to bounce right over to our inner seams now, right here, and work our way back around. Remember, laser light is going to be on the seam line when you're on the inside seam, or the inside border, excuse me. I'm going to click on this and just work our way around. And once we are done with that, we're going to head back over to the computer screen. So I'm finishing off my point right there. So let's head back over to the computer screen. And I'm going to go into my push pin icon. I'm going to click on Done, because I'm done placing them, and I want to remove all of these push pins. Now I just have this pink magenta line to give myself a visual of what the corner and the border look like on the quilt. So I'm going to come back into my my home icon, my transform icon, and I'm going to drag and drop my corner. And I'm going to set my corner at the upper left section of my push pin boundary that I've drawn. And I'm going to grab my lower right square, and I'm going to pull it down and size that corner with my border. And you can play around with this and get it exactly where you want it. Like, it's kind of a little high up here, so we might give ourselves a little bit of a margin to play with. Kind of bring this up a little bit. This is all personal preference, but you're sizing it the way you would like it to be. So I have this one set. I'm going to make a copy of this. So I'm going to right click and make a copy. That's going to place this one. I'm just going to drag it over here. And anytime you're working with borders and corner patterns, you always want to rotate them when you're wanting to place it in, especially this one. You see how it's not falling in properly? So with this selected, I can come over here to my rotate tool on the right-hand side. I'm going to do a rotation of 90 degrees, so I have that selected, and I'm going to do a clockwise rotation. So I'll just click on clockwise, and it's going to rotate at that 90 degrees for me. Now I can place this one in that same kind of format, just kind of sizing it in, figuring out exactly where I want it to be. This is all going to be personal preference again. Getting it in there exactly the way that you like it to look, exactly what you're comfortable with. Now that I have those corners placed, I want to place in my repeats that are going to fit in between it. A good way to do that is to figure out the height of your actual design. So what I do with this is I actually divide out one part of this repeat just to get a true height. So I'm going to come into my divide tool and just select a midway point right here is good. And I'm going to say accept, come back into transform, and now when I left click, only this one section is highlighted. You also have a measuring tool. You can measure that section as well, whatever is easier for you. So I have this one selected, and I've got a height of 5.583 over here on the right-hand side. So I'm going to take my border section for my key dot pattern. I'm just going to drag and drop it over. And one more time, we have 5.583. So I'm going to select my repeat, change its height to 5.583. Click OK. It's going to size that one in. And I'm going to get it as close as I can with the ending point of its corner repeat right here. So I've just kind of sized it and drug it to get close to that section. Now I need to add in additional repeats to fill this up. So I can go up to the top of the screen and I can use my More Repeat tool. I'm going to click on that. And for this one, I just need one extra repeat. However, you can add as many as you need for this to work. So I've got that placed, that second one placed. And you can see I've got a little bit of a gap here. So instead of stretching this over, I can pull this all as one. I'm going to line this up, this corner up, with the ending point of the second repeat I just put in, just like so. I can highlight all of these at one time and use my stretch just to slowly move that over. It is just evenly dispersed that stretch across all of these, as opposed to stretching the second one over and having these pearls turn into a little bit of an egg at that point. So you can select them all and evenly distribute all of that right there. Now, if you have a long border, this is just a small 36.5-inch border widthwise. But if you've got a long 108-inch wide border and the border's not perfectly straight, not that we've never seen those before, but it's not perfectly straight, when you add in additional repeats, you'll see that they are combined as one, or they're grouped together as one. And sometimes you might have to make individual adjustments to each of those repeats. So you can go in and select what you've added more to, come into your group tool, and ungroup those. So I can click on ungroup, select it again, and now if I go back to transform, you'll see that they're all individual pieces. So that'll help you make any adjustments there if you need them. The last thing that I would do is come in and this one right here, I'd actually want to adjust this. It's a little high on that side. So I'm going to bring this down just a hair like that. Yeah, that's nice. Oh, now I got to adjust it. Now my OCD is kicking in. I could have just left it alone, but no. There we go. All right, so now I've got that in place. So now that those are there, the last thing I want to do is come in and link these together so they stitch continuously. So I'm going to left click on my far left one over here. I'm going to go to my grouping tool and click on link. And then I just click every pattern after that in sequence. So that way they're going to stitch continuously. I'll hit accept. I'm going to go up to File, Save My Project, and then I can click Go. It's going to populate up, asking me to hit Continue. I'll hit Continue. The machine's going to move to its starting position. Once I see that image displayed up on the computer screen, let me know I can take a single stitch, pull up my bobbin thread, hold those threads nice and taut, and press Continue. Have my scissors handy and trim away those excess threads. Alrighty, coming into its last final process here. It's going to tie off for us. I can push my machine away, grab my thread, take a single stitch where it stopped, and trim those threads away. And then like I talked about when we first started out in our introduction, you're going to do that top border corner first. Then you'll do everything on the inside of the quilt. We kind of did that a little bit opposite just to make it a little bit easier for filming. But you're going to do everything on the center or on the inside of the quilt. You're going to roll and leave this excess on the side. Just leave that empty, and I'll see you down at the bottom of the quilt. Okay, so we're down here at the bottom of our quilt. We've done everything on the inside, and we've done that top border and corner. Now we need to draw out our push pin boundary for the bottom part of our border. So I'm going to take my machine head, and I'll start over here on the left-hand side. And this is all personal preference on where you want to click this out to. I'll turn on my laser light so I can make sure I'm a little bit more accurate. And I'm going to go ahead and use my left handle button and click push pins around the bottom of this. Remember, just when you're on the outside section where your basting is, laser light on the basting when you're doing that, and then when you get to your inside portion, laser light on the seam line. So you're working around this as you go, just like so. Once we get up to here, we'll just bounce straight over. No extra clicks needed until we get right here. We're going to take a click and then work our way back around. And if you'll notice on the screen, you'll see that it's drawing out that push pin boundary. Now, I kind of jumped the gun over what we were doing, and it's gonna just drawing that push pin boundary right over the top of that, which is perfectly fine. No big deal at all. Just gonna set this just like so. And we're gonna go into our push pin icon. I'm gonna go ahead and click done and remove all. Oh, that looks like a fun mess on top of here, but that's okay. We'll work with it. So what I want to do is I need to get rid of this other push pin drawing from the previous section from the top. So I'm going to right click on that and delete it, just like so, and come back into transform. So now I've got that set up. I've got my original section from the top. I'm going to select this, and I'm actually going to rotate it around. So I can come over to rotate. I've got 90 degrees on, and I'm going to do clockwise and clockwise. That's going to rotate that around and set it where then I can just drag and set this exactly where I need it to go on the quilt in my border. So I can just move this around, get it exactly where I want it to be, make any adjustments that are needed. Now, we linked them together previously. So if you have the boundary that is a little bit wavy at the bottom that you need to make adjustments for, you can select these as they are because they're just one, go into your grouping tool, and you can ungroup them. So click on ungroup and then select them, and now you'll have your individual lines again. So if you want to make adjustments to those patterns, you can definitely do that really, really easily. And then once you're done with that, I'll show you once more how you can go in and link them. So we will select the pattern that we want to start with, link, and then work our way around. I'll say accept, come back into transform. Now we use these patterns from the previous time when we were at the very top, which means they're red, they are DQ'd, they've already been sewn. We need to tell the software that we want to sew them again now that we've changed them up. So I can right click on them and I can come down to Q. So I'm gonna click on Q. Now they're green, that's telling me that I can use them to sew or to quilt. So I'm gonna go to File, Save Project, click Go. Once I click on Go, the machine's gonna build its sewing profile, and I can click Continue when that shows up, walk over to the machine. Now it's gonna start on the right-hand side because remember we rotated them around, and that starting point's now over here. So I can take a single stitch to pull up my thread. I'll pull up my thread here, just like so. And I'll go ahead and turn off my laser light, and I'm going to hit continue. Pause the machine real quick, trim my threads, and then hit continue again. All right, so it's coming up here to its ending stitch. What I'm going to do is push the machine away just like normal, grab some thread, come back, take a single stitch, and then what I'm going to do is trim away those threads. And now what we can do is take off our clamps. We're going to take the quilt off the frame and physically rotate it, put it back on, and we're going to finish off the sides. Alrighty, so we have turned the quilt on the frame, and shout out to Red Snappers. It's so much faster to do it that way whenever I'm rotating them. And now that I've got my border set up this way, I do need to redraw a new sew zone because things have moved around and I don't know exactly where things are at, and it might not stitch past a certain length when we were working with something very skinny to begin with. So let's head over to the computer real quick, and I'm going to move what's on my screen just off to the side. I'm just going to move this over here right now. I'm going to go ahead and delete the pushpin drawing that we had, and I'm going to redraw a new sew zone. So right down here at the bottom I can click on sew zone, and creating a new one will exist, and I'll say OK. And I'm going to take my machine to the back right hand corner of my project, and I'm going to go ahead and click on accept, and then I'm going to take it to the front left side of my project and click on accept there, just to get myself a new space to work from. Perfect. Okay, so now if we look on the quilt, you will have distinct points that you need to connect your patterns up to. We've got an ending point here, or a starting point here where this one started, and then this ending one here. So I need to give myself some type of line to work with, and I need to give myself some type of drawing of a boundary, more or less, to give myself a visual on the screen of what I'm doing. So first I'm going to start with some push pins to give myself a visual. So I'm going to use my left handle button, laser light on the basting. It doesn't matter how far in you go. And I'm going to click some points around my section here that I've got. Going to drop straight down, laser light on the seam line now as we're working all the way around here. Once we get to the ending point, we can head back over to our computer, and we're going to come into our pushpin icon. We're going to click done, and we're going to go ahead and remove all of those push pins. So that's that first step right there. Next step is I need to give myself a line to follow, something visually on the screen that I know where I need to connect repeats to. So I'm going to come into draw text. I'm going to change my input to sew head. I'm going to scroll down to where it says create, my segment type of line, and I'm going to click on begin. I'm going to take my machine to the first point that I want to start with right here on the left hand side. I'm going to set my laser light right over that point, and I'm going to press done on my lightning stitch screen. I know it's kind of confusing, but you're going to press done, and that's going to drop your first point. After it drops your first point, you'll notice you can see one on the screen. Then we can just jump right over to our section over here where we want to connect up, and you can press your right handle button on your machine, and that'll drop your second point. Now what we can do is we can head back over to our computer, and I can click done right here where it says create, and that's going to give me a line on the screen to follow. So that's where I need to start my stitching up, and this is where I need to end it out at. So if we remember earlier, let's go back into transform. If we remember earlier, we had to get a specific height of the pattern to use, and I want to keep that height the same around the whole entire quilt. So we need to come in. These were ungrouped originally. Remember, we linked them together at the beginning. So with this selected, I'm going to come in to my grouping function. I'm going to hit ungroup and select them. Now they've all ungrouped. I can go back to transform, select one of the repeats, and that's going to give me that height that I'll need. So I need 5.488. So I'm going to grab these, move them out of the way. And I also want to go ahead and DQ this line. This line that we drew is a stitchable line, and it's going to start stitching first because it's the first thing that was put on the screen if we hit go. So I'm going to go ahead and right click on this line and go to DQ to make it red so it doesn't accidentally stitch, okay? So we're going to drag and drop our border repeat over. We needed a height of, one more time, let's double check, 5.488. So select that repeat, change the height of the pattern to 5.488. We're going to click OK. We're going to get this starting point on the left starting point over here, just like that. Pretty, that's good. And then we're going to go to our more repeat tool up here at the top and add in additional repeats across. Now, once we get close enough to the side where this is, you're probably about an inch or so, less than an inch away from that. I wouldn't want to add on an additional one because that's going to be too far. So what you can do is I just did a Control Z there to undo if you went too far, or you can go to Edit, Undo, either one. You can take this and just stretch him over. Remember we talked about how it was going to equally distant take across these all the way, so it's going to fill that space up nicely to fit those sections right there. Now at this point you could make adjustments to this if you needed to prior to doing anything else, but I want to get them at least snapped to that line because it's not snapped there yet, it's just kind of off my eye. So I'm going to drag this out of the way. I'm going to come into my End Snap tool, and I'm going to grab this first Start Snap and just drag it over to this one. Same thing over here, drag it to that one. Once it turns red, it's going to click in. We can go back into Transform, and we can make any individual adjustments to these patterns if we'd like maybe we want to bring them a little closer to the seam line like we've been doing around the rest of the quilt. So with these all selected, you can come into your grouping tool once more, ungroup, select them, and now they're all individual pieces. So at this point you can go back into Transform and kind of stretch these down a little closer. Now remember that height that we entered in, and this is kind of a sidebar while I'm doing this stretching, the height that we entered in of that 5.48 was a little bit different from that original design. That has everything to do with the adjustments that we made. So always remember that you might have a little bit of difference in your height numbers, and it has everything to do with any adjustments that you've made in the process. So we're going to take all these around, fix this, fix that. You can move things anywhere you'd like. Just make sure you kind of keep them together. Now, one thing here is we have moved these start points. So remember we had snapped this to this section earlier. If I selected all of these patterns and went in with End Snap and moved them again, it would defeat the purpose of me ungrouping and individually moving these around having to do with the border. So what I would do is just select this first repeat, come into your Draw Text, which is where you're going to find your nodes, and just move that right to that starting point. Same thing at the end. Come over here, select this one, and zoom in, move that right to here, okay? And any additional changes you need to make to get things in alignment with each other, you can definitely do that. I just kind of get those out of the way at starter point as opposed to having to think about it later. So I'm just going to move these around out of the way, just clicking on each repeat and moving those nodes individually. Now I do want to make sure this stitches continuously, so I will link these together. So I'm going to go into my grouping tool. I'm going to click on link. I'm going to select my first repeat and then click on my additional ones after that to make sure they're going to stitch continuously. I'm going to click on accept. I will save my project, and then I can click go. After I click on go, in just a second it's going to prompt me with a continue. I'm going to click on continue. The machine's going to automatically move to its starting point, and it's going to go exactly where we need it to because we did that draw line. Got a little bit of fullness in the border. It's going to be awesome to watch how we can fill that in. I'm going to pull up my bobbin thread. I'm going to press continue. It's going to do its tie-offs for me. And this is where we get to play with that fullness factor and kind of ease things in to the quilting. And it's coming around on its last curve right here, and it's going to end up exactly where I need it to, which is awesome. I can push my machine away, grab some thread, come back, take a single stitch, push it away again, and trim my bobbin. I'm going to trim that right there. I can take off my clamps, and now we're going to roll to the other side of the quilt. Okay, so I've rolled the quilt, and I've done a little bit of prereq work here on this. I went in and drew a push pin boundary around the section that we need to quilt. You've seen that before like we did at the beginning. So go ahead and do that in there. And then we need to go ahead and give ourselves a line to follow. Now, borders and corners work in a circular motion around the quilt, in a clockwise fashion around the quilt. So at the top of this turned quilt, we clicked our line from left to right. Now that we're at the bottom of this, kind of coming into the bottom of the circle, we need to click our line from right to left to give us a good visual of where the true starting point needs to be, especially if your patterns are directional. You're really going to want to make sure you do this. So I'm going to go into Draw Text, change my input to Sew Head, scroll down to Line, click on Begin. I'm going to move my machine, since I'm starting on the right hand side, I'm going to start at the right point that I want to connect up with and put my laser right over that. Tap Done on my screen, and then I can move my machine over to the left, and I can press my right handle button. And so once those are done, you can head back to your screen. I'm going to click Done underneath Create, and that's going to give me a line that I need to follow. And since I know that the green start is over here, red's over here, this gives me an idea of how I need to snap these to this line, because I want green to green and red to red. So I'm going to select this section, come back into Transform, select this section, and I am going to use my rotate option right over here. I've got 90, and I'm going to do a clockwise rotate and another clockwise rotate. So click clockwise twice. Now we've got the green to match green and red to match red. So I'm going to remember this line that we've drawn is a stitchable line, so we need to make sure we DQ that. We're going to right click on that line, DQ it. Now that it's red, we can work with this. So I'm going to select this group of patterns, come in with my End Snap tool, end to end, end to end. It's going to drop those right in. Now you're going to have to make additional adjustments because sometimes your borders aren't perfectly straight. I mean, we've never seen that, but sometimes it happens that way. And you might have to make some individual adjustments here. Since this is already selected, go ahead and come on in with your grouping tool and ungroup these patterns, just like so. Come back in with Transform, and you can select these patterns individually and make any adjustments that you need to. I might go through these and just bring them all down together because it's a pretty straight line. That was pretty close there. So bring those together. Might bring this a little closer to the seam line out here, just like so. And then the only adjustments that I'll have to make, remember, is my points here. So select that repeat, come in with your Draw Text, which will open up your nodes, and then move it to attach next to this. Now remember, it's not going to snap automatically to it, but we're just moving it to that line. Same thing with our ending one here. We're going to take this pattern, select it, come in with that node, and drag it to where I need it to stop, which is right here. Once we've done that, remember we want to link them together so they stitch continuously. So we're going to start on the right-hand side, go into our grouping tool, select link. Since this pattern's already selected, then we're going to go to this one, to this one, to this one. So we can stitch from right to left to keep that in our brain that these borders and corners work in circular motions. We'll click on Accept. And then last but not least, these patterns are red. We want to make them green so we can actually stitch them. So we're going to right click and cue the patterns. They're green. We can save our project. So File, Save Project. Click Go. We'll wait for the system to prompt us. I'm going to click Continue and then head over to my quilt. Machine's going to get to its starting position exactly where it needs to be. I'm going to take a single stitch to pull up my bobbin thread. Hold those threads nice and taut, and tap continue on my screen. It's going to take its tie-off stitches. And then this is where we get to sit and help it ease in fullness if needed, or we get to sit back and watch autopilot do its work. Coming up here to our final repeat, a little bit of fullness on this side, so I'm just going to kind of ease it into that repeat so it kind of sucks it into it instead of creating a lump or a fold or a pucker or anything like that. It's going to help it naturally go into it. Coming up here to our ending point, it's going to do its tie-offs and end exactly where it needs to. Oh gosh, I love it when that happens. Push this away, come back, take a single stitch, push that away again, trim your threads, and just like that, you've completed your border corner. Thank you so much for joining me today on the final episode in the series Basically Longarm Quilting, featuring the INNOVA AutoPilot Mach 3. I hope you enjoyed learning about what AutoPilot can offer you as much as I did teaching it to you. Just a few basic tips and inspirations can really help your quilting take it to the next level, especially with AutoPilot. I'll see you next time on Basically Longarm Quilting.